Good morning and welcome to Mayor's Weekly. As always, we're pleased to have you with us. And joining me this morning is our Chief of Police, J.C. Poe. And two things that we want to talk about this morning. We want to talk about the homeless and ordinances that are in place for the city. We want to talk about those folks that station themselves along public right-of-ways and whatever, soliciting donations. But before we talk about this, I want to preface our comments with this. We are extremely sympathetic to those that are economically disadvantaged. We would never intentionally work a hardship on those people. Our efforts are going to be to help them in any way we can, and only in extreme situations where we have to do something that we really don't want to do. But in the last week, I've had some calls from businesses concerning homeless folks that have the businesses felt like maybe were impairing their business a little bit. We're beginning to see more folks that are position themselves along public right-of-ways asking for donations. So I asked Chief Poe if he would come and talk a little bit about our ordinances and what you can do, can't do. And but again, please know this is not designed to work a hardship on those folks. Our desire is to help the economically disadvantaged, and that's what we'll do. Chief Poe, with that in mind, and you're familiar with what I'm talking about, businesses calling, that sort of thing, homeless people. But one of the things I think is fundamental to this discussion, and we've run into this things unrelated to the homeless, but when you drive down 19th Street or down 3rd Avenue, those buildings have zero lot lines. When you step on the threshold for the front door of that business, then whoever owns that building, that's their building, and they can do pretty much what they want to as long as it's consistent with the law. But when you step onto that sidewalk, that business has no right to that sidewalk. It's public property, and it's governed and controlled by the city. Is that right?
Yes, sir, it is.
And Chief, if you could, let's talk a little bit about ordinances and your long experience in law enforcement, what we try to do, what we can do, what we can't do, what those that are homeless, what they can do.
Okay. We do have a growing number of homeless people in Jasper, and if you've been downtown, I'm sure that you've seen some of them. And when our officers come across these people, the homeless, we try to assess them and talk with them, and a lot of them have mental issues, and some of them have economical and mental issues, and we try to get help for them. There's a homeless coalition here in Walker County, and they're based in Jasper, and we periodically have meetings with Carrie, that is the director of it, and we try to come up with ways to be able to assist these people and get them in a structured environment that they can get some help. Some of them won't receive the help. They're just not in the mental state at that time that they'll receive help. But if they need medical help, then we'll call an ambulance and see if they'll go to the hospital. And very rarely have we ever put one of them in jail. When we do, it's been to the point nothing else has been able to be done with them, and they violated a law that against a property or a person. We have not put anybody in jail for being homeless. We can't do that. We have loitering laws, but that is an extreme for us to enforce one of those. We have a certain amount of homeless people here living in tents, and we probably got, it's hard to estimate or actually have a head count, but just a guess is maybe a couple of dozen of homeless people around Jasper. And like I said, some of them are living in tents and they're on private properties, and the people on those properties sometimes have called us and asked us to go and tell them they need to move to another location. And we've done that, and we try to do that in a humane way, and while we're there, try to get them whatever help they can and get them in a environment that can be helpful to them and their health. We have the people that are standing out on corners soliciting funds. we have an ordinance that is a panhandling ordinance. And, we go by until we tell those people when we get a call on them or one of our officers observes one of them doing it, then we advise them that we have an ordinance against that and they can't do that. And so I don't think we probably arrested maybe one or two and given them a citation for that. And when we've done that, it's after they've been warned 2 to 3 or 4 times. We never do that on the first time. And, we've had 1 or 2 of them that have had vehicles parked away from them, and they've been loaded down with food and canned goods and things of that nature that people's given to them. But a large majority of them actually, they need help. And we try to get those people help, and we'll get them over with the Salvation Army and try to get them housing until a more permanent help can be obtained for them.
Chief, I know one of the things that prompted calls last week, 2 of our businesses felt like the presence of homeless people in front of a contiguous business that was not open was having an impact on their business. Their patrons were a little concerned about what was going on there. And certainly those businesses are in their right to call and report that and not have their businesses impaired by those sort of things. Is that right?
That is correct. And those businesses called the police department, and I spoke with one of the business owners myself, and they asked that they not be arrested, but just ask them to move on and go somewhere else. And in these businesses, they had a little nook in their storefront, and that was the private property of the business owner that these folks were in. And then when they move out to the sidewalk, then we can move them from there without being told by a business owner or requested by a business owner. But they move on somewhere else, and then we have to deal with them when they go on somewhere else.
Chief, one of the things that I think our officers encountered, and I know one of our employees here at the city that looked at, there's a building down here that's contiguous, I guess, to maybe Fifth Avenue that's kind of doesn't have a top on it, something
Hollowed out.
Well, yeah, that some homeless people told them that had been donated to homeless people and they could stay there. That's not true.
No.
That property is under responsible ownership, and they will not tolerate that sort of thing. So if you know homeless people and they're under that impression, that is not correct. And Chief, as far as the panhandle ordinance, I know most recently a young man stationed. I come to work, and I turned down Oak Hill Road, and right there is where 195 and 5 converge into 9th Avenue, and a young man positioned right out there. That's a dangerous place to be with all of that traffic and people turning and that sort of thing. But if, like I said, we don't want to work a hardship on those folks, but more times than not, those folks put themselves in dangerous positions. And if you see that going on, we need to advise them to move on, don't we, Chief?
We do, yes. And that young man you're speaking of, I think he's the one that he'll hold up religious signs. It's got religious message on. He's not actually asking for a donation, but if you offer him one, he'll take it.
Yeah.
And that makes it a little difficult to deal with.
Yeah. It's, but I felt like that it was enough of an issue that we needed to talk about it this morning. And if you have thoughts or ideas of the way we can help, we want to hear. And consistent with what the Chief shared with you, in no way do we want to work a hardship on these people. We want to help them.
Yes, exactly. And like I said, our officers, the first thing they do is try to see if they have a mental condition going on or a health issue going on, and we'll get them to a medical facility or Northwest Alabama Mental Health. We try to get them some type of help so they can have a better future.
Let me close with this. Fiscal year 2020 will wind down the 30th day of this month, which is just days away. While we do not know precisely what our numbers will look like, we know enough to know that we're going to have another very, very good year in the operation of this city. I'm always amazed that I don't do Facebook, but how people will take to Facebook and publish how little they know about a subject, but get caught up on things that fall below being insignificant. You've uncovered that, hadn't you, Chief? But just yesterday, our syndicated columnist, Steve Flowers, I've known Steve for a long time, grew up down in Troy, Alabama. Steve, early days of his career goes all the way back to George Wallace, and he's been in the political arena. Great newspaper writer. Steve has 61 newspapers with a readership of over 370,000 people. And he wrote a column yesterday, and if you still have your Mountain Eagle, you can read it. But he talked about the position of mayor and some of the heavyweights across the state. But we got a very, very good mention. He indicated that Jasper had been run like a well-tuned engine, and I thought that was a tremendous compliment for our city. When they're talking about folks like Tommy Battle and some of the other heavyweights across this state, but to think about 370,000 people across this state can see that certainly does not hurt our city. I'm pleased with the operation, and I think if you can have an objective mind and you look at it, you have to be pleased with how this city has been run. And so we thank you for being with us today, and we'll look forward to being with you next week. And again, send us your questions and we'll provide answers. Thank you.